You're most welcome.
In 1987, the retail world was facing intense challenges. Two giants in their industries, Walmart and Procter and Gamble, were locked in an adversarial relationship. They were competitors rather than allies, and conflicts threatened to slow the growth of both. That year, Tom Muccio and his team challenged the status quo. Under his leadership, the team moved to Bentonville, Arkansas, the headquarters of Walmart, with a clear purpose: to build trust and change how the two companies worked together. Tom and his team started by identifying the key problems: lack of trust, opposing visions, and a relationship based on conflict rather than collaboration. But instead of giving up, Muccio and his team devised a revolutionary plan. First, he built strong relationships based on trust, living Walmart's culture up close and establishing a genuine connection with its leaders. Second, he promoted long-term joint planning. Walmart and P&G stopped focusing on one-off transactions and started thinking like strategic partners with a shared vision. And third, they changed the negotiating mindset. Instead of debating prices and margins, they introduced a collaborative approach focused on solving problems together. This change transformed the relationship between Walmart and P&G, marking a before and after in global retailing. Thanks to Tom's vision, strategic collaboration replaced conflict, driving unprecedented growth for both companies. Today, the model implemented by Tom Muccio is studied in business schools and recognized as one of the most successful partnerships in history. The story of this revolution is captured in his book Collaborative Disruption, a legacy of leadership and collaboration that continues to inspire the business world. Meet the man behind Collaborative Disruption. Welcome to Tom Muccio's talk.
Okay, Tom, let's start to the point. Let's go back to 1987. Tell us about Procter & Gamble and Walmart at that time. The relationship where Lou Pritchett described it as both companies focused on the customer, both of them, but each independently of each other. What did you find in 1987?
Well, let me just set the scene a little bit. In 1987, P&G was the largest and most successful consumer product company in the world. We were very complacent. We were very arrogant. We thought, you know, that the three things we did very well. We did market research to find out what did consumers want. Where were there gaps in the market that we could fill? Then we would develop and manufacture superior products. We would then advertise. We were the leading advertiser in the world: TV advertising, soap operas. We did door-to-door sampling. We created the demand. The customer was really nowhere. It was a convenient pickup point for our products. At that time, the retail industry was going through a little bit of a metamorphosis. Club stores were coming out, discounters were coming out, and so the world was in a little bit of a flux in the retail market. And Sam Walton was trying to be disruptive. He came out with a discounter, but he was going to do everyday low price. So the prices would be low all the time, instead of the rest of the market was high-low. In order to do that, he needed the CPG companies to change the way they promoted so that he could do that. Well, CPG companies didn't want to change. And P&G was his largest supplier, and so he said he was just desperate to get P&G to change, because if he could get P&G to change, he thought that would get other people would follow, and you know, his model would work. And he He used to laugh and say, if I wanted to punish one of my buyers, I'd put him on the P&G business. Because we had 8 different divisions that called on Walmart. So it was 8, just like they had 8 different suppliers. All the invoices said Procter Gamble, but the terms were different in each of the companies, each of the divisions. In fact, one of my colleagues said P&G was a Mercedes that we broke up to make 8 bicycles. So he even called our CEO to try to see if he could get a relationship. Our CEO administrator wouldn't take the call. Our CEO didn't talk to customers, and she didn't know who Sam Walton was. So the relationship between the two companies was very adversarial. There was a winner and loser. It was very transactional. There was no long-term planning. Both companies just wanted what they wanted. They didn't care what the impact was on the others. And the whole relationship was led by a buyer and a salesperson, 2 of the most unqualified in the whole system to manage the whole system.
So there was definitely a dark cloud, between the companies.
Yeah, there was no trust. There was no, they were stuck down in Bentonville. It was a long trip to get down there. We managed our business at that time by market, not by customer.
And then in the summer of 1987, again, Mr. Sam Walton and Mr. Lou Pritchett started asking what-if questions.
Yes.
What if the 2 companies open up their hoods and shared information and let the other one see inside? What if they shared relevant data? What if they coordinated on supply chains, marketing, payment processes? And the big question, what if they acted as one company?
Yes. Well, Sam Walton said, it was brilliant. He said, if you thought of my stores as an extension of your company, we would do business entirely differently. And we then internalized that and said, we're going to call this the one company operating model. We are going to, even though we're 2 separate companies, we are going to pretend that we're one company on the way we do business. So we'll flow chart every process, everything that we do. We'll take a look at the total system, and we'll say, wait a minute, you're doing that and we're doing that. Maybe one of us doesn't need to do that. So that was the way that we were able to move forward, was thinking about it as one company.
And we'll go through that workflow and we'll go through the process in detail, hopefully, in this conversation. And then January 10th, 1989, you became the Director of Customer Business Development. So you had to set up shop in Bentonville, Arkansas, 38 years ago, and you got to tell us some stories about Bentonville, Arkansas, 38 years ago, and started figuring out what to do. First question in terms of setting up, how did you start to develop trust in the team?
Well, what we found was that we didn't understand each other very well. Walmart was everything about low price and commodity. They thought everything was a commodity. We didn't really understand how they made money in retail. And so we started by just learning about each other's company. The first group of people on our team worked a week in a Walmart store so we could see what did that look like, and a day in a distribution center. And we then took their team. What we did is we had all our functions and all their functions, and we called that a mirror team because they were the mirror image of each other. And that really became like the board of directors of the relationship. So we took them to Cincinnati so they could listen to our consumer lines, they could see what we did in R&D, and they came away saying, oh, whoa, we didn't realize that you did all that research in order to come up with these products. So once we started that, we then said, okay, if we're going to work together, what's the common vision that we should have? And we did what we called co-design. We worked through things together, and we came up with a common vision, common objectives. We then started sharing data, and once we started doing that, we then said, okay, let's get some low-hanging fruit, and we got some success, and that just motivated us to do more and more. P&G didn't really want to do this. This was not a popular idea at P&G. I was not I was,
Because it was complacent
yeah,
and arrogant.
yeah.
and-
I was not a popular guy coming up with this idea and then going to do it. In Walmart, they were suspicious because they said P&G will never change. So that's, in the two head offices, one said they'll never change, and one said we don't want to do this.
And one of the key factors that you describe as being a game changer here was the trust and, the commitment at the very top.
Yes.
Tell us about that commitment at the very top that really was able to enable this change that you
Well,
started.
collaboration is based on mutual interest. People won't collaborate unless they can see a benefit for themselves. And so we articulated and said we want to make this a win-win overall, but in no case will we do activities that are win-lose. We can do win-win or win-neutral. So I would, if something Walmart wanted to do benefit to them, didn't cost me anything, we do it. But yeah, it was more or less just amazing that we were able to do some of the things that we were able to do.
And one of the things that you highlight is the vision. Mr. Sam Walton saying, if you thought of my stores as an extension of your company, we would be doing business in a very different way.
Yes.
How did that vision drive the work that you led?
Well, to the point you were making earlier, this is something you can't do in the middle of the organization. If you don't have the top of the organization supporting this, it won't work. And I will say this over and over, you need to make collaboration a corporate strategy, just like any other strategy. And that means it needs to be resourced, it needs to be supported, all the things that you would do for any other company strategy. And by having that top support, and both CEOs sent signals to the organization that they wanted to do this and they were going to support it.
What
Because
type
everybody-
of signals?
Pardon?
What type of signals did they send?
The P&G CEO had Sam and Helen Walton over for dinner, and they invited my wife and I to join these two CEOs, my wife and I, okay? And I mean, I'm totally out of my league, but our CEO made it sound like I was his hand-picked person. I was going to have access to him at all times in the relationship. And then Sam spent a lot of time trying to get to know my wife and I and our background, and he had been expecting somebody from Harvard or the East Coast, and here I was just kind of a regular person. And so when he went back, he told his secretary, I think this might work. He's just a regular guy. And then Sam had like a bazillion acres in South Texas where they would go quail hunting every year. And he would bring his executive team down there and they'd have meetings, and then they would go out quail hunting. They never invited anybody other than internal people or family friends. He invited me to go hunting, which was a signal to his organization. And that was hilarious as well. I'd never shot a shotgun before. I just was worried I'd shoot one of his dogs. And it was crazy. I did kill 5 quail, unlucky quail. They had to be flying. They just flew into where I shot. But anyhow, that was a signal. And then on that trip, he asked me to come up with an idea that he could then make his item in P&G for the year. They had a thing called a volume producing item, and each of their executives would pick an item, and then they would, at their meetings, they would say, oh, my item's doing better than your item and whatever. I had no authority to do this. But I knew that he was saying, I want to see if this guy has any authority at all, or what's going to be. So I made up this proposal, I gave it to him, he bought it, and then I had to go back to Cincinnati and sell it, which was not a pretty sight, but our vice chairman came to my defense and said, we're going to do this. But again, that didn't help my popularity. I got crossed off a lot of Christmas card lists.
So you had a vision, you had the commitment from the top.
Yes.
You moved to Bentonville, Arkansas in 1989, and then you had to work with your arrogant and, we know it all, P&Gers, with a local team in Walmart, and you had to start working on the structure
Yes.
in a very hierarchical, bureaucratic P&G.
Yep.
How did you move that structure? How did you shake that structure?
I describe it as the cultures were very different. P&G is very hierarchical. Walmart was very much, the senior executives were not pretentious at all. They shared rooms on the road because everything was about everyday low price. They made fun of each other at meetings. It was just really very collegial in that regard. And we used to describe it as Walmart's philosophy was ready, fire, aim, and P&G was ready, aim again, change the site, aim again. So they were about speed, we were about thoroughness.
Those are ones that are laughing, they're all P&Gers. You know why they're laughing.
But what happened is we taught each other, they taught us how to go faster, and we taught them that going fast doesn't mean you can't shoot at the target. So we just started doing things. We'd say, when we'd get together, it was amazing because most people grew up in a company and they knew what their function did and they knew what their company did. They were so internally focused and functionally focused. That's the way they viewed the world. But by having a multifunctional team and the whole system to look at, finance would say, well, hey, did you know this? No, why is that? Is that important? And then they would explain it and we say, whoa, yeah, we can do that. And so that's the way we just started by trying it and doing it, and then marketing our success within both companies for people to build confidence and let us try bigger things and bigger things.
So you're talking about the whole system, from end to end.
Yes.
Let's dig down on the business processes that you started working on, and how you started trying, fixing, changing, testing. Tell us, anecdotes or cases of business processes that you went into and that you completely changed because of this one team approach.
Well, what we did is we took our data and their data and we made what we called a data highway. And then, like any other highway, it has exits. And when we did that, we said, well, wait a minute. You're making an order, you're giving it to our salesperson. Our salesperson is then placing an order and through that whole system. So we're doing duplicate work. We said, what if you give us the information and we'll do the ordering. And so we took all the ordering off of them. They set the rules, how much inventory needed to be there, but because of their sophisticated IT system, every time an item got scanned at the register, it recorded, and we were getting that data real time and replacing it in each of the distribution centers, it took their inventory turns from 19 to 47, or from 20 to 47, and they had to pay us in 19 days. So they were selling it twice before they had to pay us the first time. So I didn't understand cash flow at that time, but when my finance manager said, this is cash flow, they're going to like this. So I went to the CEO and said, we did whatever the number was, the cash flow. Wow, that's impressive. Then P&G said, nice going, Tom. You just took over their work. We said, we're not finished yet. So we went to our suppliers. Because we had this data much earlier than we would have before, we were getting it real time. Our manufacturing plants could plan better and move production to the different plants, and our suppliers reduced their price to us because of the just-in-time inventory approach that they could then take. So we whatever it cost us to manage their business, we made up 3 times from our suppliers. So it's just an example of where we used to call it new money, because people are always trying to get a lower price. And we came up with a concept called new money, which was money that's trapped in the system but isn't really adding any value. But if you can get that money that's trapped in there, you can use it for some other purpose.
Of course, this process was not seamless, of course. You know, many things didn't work the way you wanted, many things didn't work as quick as you wanted. What happened when things didn't work? And one of your famous, and Tom's phrases are called Muccioisms, because he uses a lot of metaphors to explain situations. One of your most famous Muccioisms is walk towards the barking dog concept.
Yes.
Tell us, how did you approach things when things just didn't happen?
Well, I came up with that because I was a paper boy in the old days, and I got chased by lots of dogs. And I found that if you stopped and went back toward the dog, most dogs would back up, and if it was a mean dog, you were going to get bit anyhow because you couldn't outrun it. And I translated that your problems won't go away by themselves. You got to face them. So when we had things where there was disagreement, we had a problem, we came up with a real easy way of talking about them. Because most companies say, here's my policy, and the other one says, oh, here's my policy. We said, we're going to work on issues, not positions, and we're going to look for what's right, not who's right. And when you put those two parameters there, it was amazing how you could talk differently about any issue. There was nothing you couldn't put on the table and talk about. And they would say, well, if you do, here's what the implications are for us if this happened, and we would do the same. And what we found was most solutions were not the Walmart way or the P&G way, but there was some compromise in order to make that happen. The program worked really well at Walmart fast, and as we got success, remember, they didn't think we'd change. They were seeing change. So they got more and more supportive. P&G still don't want to do this.
And we're going to move into the Five Dragons concept, because that's, again, things that don't work, bigger problems. But how did you maintain that culture day to day? How did you approach that P&G and Walmart culture and make it one different, unique, one team culture?
We tried to take the best of both companies, but because we were in Arkansas and Walmart was about everyday low price, we made all of our offices the same size. And I would have had a huge office in Cincinnati, but we made them all the same size because that's the way Walmart had done it. And we made the corner, instead of a corner office, the boss has a corner office, we made all the corner offices conference rooms. So what we were doing is showing a little bit of humility and a little bit, we tried to fit in with the culture and recognize we were living in a small town. And so, but it was kind of like building a friendship. When you meet somebody and you're a little bit vulnerable and you share, and then next time you share a little bit more, and you're gradually building the trust and confidence. And we did the old Reagan, trust but verify. So when we started, they couldn't say, we trust you, P&G. All they could say is, we trust that you want to be trusted. Mm-hmm. And so they had to see evidence of that, and we had to lay that out.
So now let's get into the Five Dragons. You can have a vision, you can have a mission, you can have a team, you can have the right culture. We've talked about the right structure, and you can work on the business processes. You can have everything you need, but there are resistance, barriers, and big dangers.
Yes.
And you describe them as Five Dragons.
Yes. Well, in the movies, in the hero, if you want to marry the princess, you got to kill the dragon. Well, I have found there were 5 dragons in both P&G and in almost every company I've consulted with. And you will identify a lot of these in your companies, I'll bet. The first dragon is corporate fog, okay? And it manifests itself in 2 ways. The C-suite has no idea what it's like to be a customer or supplier of their own company. And as a matter of fact, if they had to buy from their own company, they would probably switch suppliers. The second thing is there are people doing the work that are doing this. They're saying, do you realize the pain we're in? Do you realize the missed opportunities? But the fog is so thick, you couldn't, they can't see it. So that was one dragon we had to kill. Second dragon, and just remember, this is in the late 80s, early 90s, so this is not Trump. There was the deep state, which were the people that were in power in the company who didn't want to, they were very happy being the boss. They were very happy with everything. They didn't need someone else questioning what they did and recommending something different. The third dragon was the bureaucracy. Oh, we just can't do that. It's going to be too hard. We can't do this. We can't do that. And then the fourth dragon, I call them the Flat Earth Society. And if you remember when Columbus was going to go, they said, oh, we've seen the map. They just fall off the edge. Well, they would say, there's no use even trying this. We know it won't work. And then the one that I like the least was, I call them the loyal opposition. Regardless of what you did and how successful you are, they would always find something that was wrong with what you did or how you did it. So those were the five dragons that you always had to deal with. And the way you kill those dragons, first of all, you have to, think of fog as number one. How does the sun, or how does nature get rid of fog? The sun shines until you can see reality. So the first step in corporate fog is understanding truth. Once you understand truth, if something's broken or painful or a missed opportunity, there's lots of options to fix it. But you first have to understand that reality. Then the second thing you had to do was you had to be transparent. And so, it was, as we started sharing data, it was much easier for everyone to say, oh, okay, I can see this. And then, as I said before, we did issues versus position, so we could talk about any. There was no, a lot of times in relationships, I don't want to really bring that up. That's going to be a really touchy situation. We made the rule that said we can talk about anything, and we made the rule between the two companies, two teams, if you don't agree with the decision that we make, you can go one level higher in the company to revisit that subject, which was really very powerful, that we really were trying to do the right thing in the right way. And then the other thing which we did was we created the ability to do testing. Big ideas and changes are risky, and so the way that you get rid of the risk or de-risk them is you start them out in a smaller test where but importantly, you need to have success criteria when you start. So Walmart would say, for this, we're going to do this, and for this to be successful, this is what has to happen. P&G would say this, for us to expand this, this is what it's going to be. We would write it down so that we had something that then we would test it. We would have, here's the time, the money, and the payback we have for this idea. And if it met the criteria, we could then take it to our next level of management to get the money to implement it more broadly. And then the other thing we did is we measured everything because we found that there was a lot of things which, both companies had a lot of different measurements, and so we wanted to see everything we did, where did it show up on each company's scorecard? And here's a great example of two principles. We understood that labor was a big deal for a retailer. Okay, labor was their big cost in store. So we did pre-built displays where we would, on a pallet, we would put product in trays, shrink wrap or bubble or whatever, wrap it around on a pallet. It would go to Walmart's distribution center. They'd unload it from a forklift. They'd take it right over and put on a truck to go to the store. So it didn't even go into the warehouse. They called that cross-docking. Then they would unload it at the store on a forklift, take it out to the selling space, unwrap it, and they had an instant display, okay? And that saved them 37 cents a case. Well, it's a big deal. We're contributing, we did something, and we did that not to be a nonprofit, but we said that will get us more displays. The more displays we get, the more our sales will grow. But, we ran into a big problem. You know the problem with recognition and reward systems? They work. You get what you recognize, you get what you reward. The buyers had to make the decisions to bring those in, and they had to they had to treat each one like a new item. So they had a big stack of paperwork that they had to do, and they had enough other things to do. They didn't need to do that. So I got very, very frustrated. And when there's a tennis tournament or golf tournament where they have those big foam checks, you know what I'm talking about? Foam checks that
Yep.
okay.
Huge checks.
I had a check made out, foam check made out like that for $1 million made out to Walmart. And in those days, before there was all the security, I could go into their executive suite. So I stood outside their break room in the executive suite, and the CFO came out with his cup of coffee. And he said, "What are you doing here, Tom?" I said, "I have $1 million check for Walmart. I can't find anybody to take it. Come in my office, you found somebody." So when he got in there, he said, "Okay, what's the deal?" I explained it to him. He said, "I can fix that." I said, "How are you going to fix it?" "You tell me how much the savings is going to be. I'll put half of the savings in the buyer's account, and the other half it'll be in the warehouse in the store. We don't need to micromanage it. We know it's good. It'll help reduce labor." Well, now, the buyers, that was a big benefit to them to get that money into their so they would then they came to us, "Oh, can you do it on this product? Can you do it on that product? Can you do it?" And so we were getting incredible merchandising, and our market shares in business just increased. But it was a classic example of a breakthrough in one sense, but because of the recognition and reward system, it wasn't gonna take off.
So you walked us through a joint vision, the support from the leaders, structures, business processes, incentives, working on the culture. But you wouldn't be a legend, you wouldn't have written a book if the checks hadn't cashed in. The results in 14 years were impressive. From $350 million in sales, in Walmart sales of P&G products, or in P&G product sales to Walmart, up to $8 billion per year in 14 years. So the results were there, the checks cashed in.
And the other thing was, when we started, Walmart was losing 5% on P&G because they were doing this EDLP. And then every time a competitor would run an ad with a lower price, they would meet that lower price. So they were losing money on P&G, and during that period of time, we moved the margin from -5 to mid-teens. And it wasn't, we didn't just lower our price, these were system savings and things that, I don't think we ever improved more than 1.5 margin points in a year.
So this happened 25 years ago. My final question is this relevant still today?
I think it's as relevant today as it was back then. Think of all the things we've already heard today. You got evolving retail going on again. You got omni-channels. You've got various models. You got people doing delivery of products and picking in store. You've got global sourcing. You've got new media options. You've got new payment ways of doing things. So you got all these changes happening in the environment. And then COVID really set collaboration back because everybody kind of pulled in their horns with COVID. They were just trying to survive, number one. Number two, nobody wanted to relocate and move, and people were working from home, so it's really hard to have a team when nobody's there. And then you got technology. You got all this new, you got AI, you got Zoom, you got all kinds of new technology. And then a real key to me is human capital. One of the big issues that every company has today is how do I recruit, develop, and retain top talent. And this was by working on a multifunctional team, everybody gets to see their fingerprints on the results. They know when you do this, this enables us to do that. So the camaraderie and the fact that everybody really felt they were moving forward. And so what we called it commercialize everyone in the company. A lot of people would say, oh, I just run these numbers and I send them on here. I don't know what happens to them. We tried to make sure that everybody knew what they did, how did it fit in to the total success. And the last point I would make, why it's relevant today, is the world is so, if you really need to expand your network in your system. So it's not only the customer and supplier, or the customer and the retail, or supplier and the retail, but it's the suppliers of the suppliers. I mean, think of what Ola brings to the party that P&G doesn't have to invent, because they're inventing it. And you know, there's example after example where the supplier can do something that will, you know, expand the network, give you more to work on in terms of coming up with win-win, reducing cost, increasing sales. So I think it's extremely relevant today. And I would describe it, it's in some respects it's not hard, but here's the mental picture if you take a jigsaw puzzle, and there's a picture on the outside of the jigsaw puzzle, okay? And it looks really nice. Then you open the box, and there's a whole bunch of little pieces in there. So that makes it pretty complicated, because you got to take all the pieces out, turn them over, and then try to put them in together to make the picture. But it's even harder than that, because all the pieces aren't in the box. So there were things that you didn't know you needed to do. And what we called it was peeling an onion. You know, if you take an onion and you take off one layer, you can see something else. Sometimes we didn't know what we didn't know. In fact, one of my mentors said to me, what you don't know won't hurt you is what you know that's not so. And that's pretty powerful when you think about it. Because if you don't know something, you'll go find out. But if you think you know and it's not right, you're going to go more and more off track.
I want to open the floor to 2 or 3 questions before we finish. Anybody questions? Una acá a la derecha. And it'll be in English. Allá.
But I will tell you, there's really power in collaboration. I've worked with companies, big ones, little ones, all kinds of companies, and I've never seen, if people want to do it seriously, I've never seen it not work better than the old system. Never.
So I have a question, as you were asking how the model that you experienced back then is relevant today, especially with AI in the picture now. And you were talking about the 5 dragons, right? That
Yes.
you end up slaying back then. So I think with the help of AI, you can potentially instantly kill 2 or 3 out of those 5 dragons.
Well, and the other thing it does is it takes routine work and gives you more time to be where you add the value. Because if you think about when you're putting together a business plan, you're assembling all the data, and the AI is going to be able to take a lot of that work and give you the base to start the discussion for collaboration. So you're exactly right.
But what if, let's say, all your employees, all the employees in the company, including the vendors and the supplier to your vendors, communicate on a single platform.
Yes.
And then with one prompt, you could say, list all revenue generating opportunities within my company.
Yes.
that and potential risk to those opportunities.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Again, it's leveraging what's changing in the market, what technology is available, what the joint objectives and mission is. And the other thing that Sam Walton, he built his company because he was always focusing on the customer. And a lot of CPG companies are more interested in what's going on in their building instead of how that impacts the customer. But when you're working together, then you can push back on each other and say, well, help me understand, why is that good for me? But then you solve it. They have to bring, it has to be something that benefits both companies.
Una al fondo y después Isabela. Cerramos contigo.
Tom, I don't have a question, but I can complement what you say. I was the general manager of Procter Gamble in Chile at the time. And actually, your story was very, very important to all the countries in Latin America. And the important thing that we got out of it was that while we could not reapply the Walmart case in Latin America, as Walmart was not at present, we could reapply all the principles of the story you told us about. And they work to different degrees, depending on the size of the client or the development level of the client. We could apply many, many of the principles that you taught us. So from my side, thank you very much for that.
Hi, first. I heard you talked about, like, your whole talk was about the success of these two companies working together. To what extent do you think a different leadership style in each company can determine the success or the failure of two companies working together? Do you think they can work together even if they have two different leadership styles?
Well, the fact that every company does something really well. And the important thing is when you find out what this company does that works very well, then you can leverage it. And if you're working with other partners, you have more to play with. You have more raw ingredients because this company does this company does that. I worked with a little company in Switzerland once that they sold ingredients. They sold vitamins, letter vitamins, A, C, all of those. They said, and their customers were like Pepsi and Coke and Pfizer and all of these kinds. They said, we're too small to be strategic. I said, no, that's not true. And so they said, well, they don't buy that much from us. We're a small supplier. I said, but you're a key supplier by what you do. So I had to help them understand that. So I talked with their scientists. Their scientists knew what your body needed, what vitamins you needed if you're under 10, when you're a teenager, if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're older, if you're active, if you're pregnant, okay? I said, well, why don't you develop formulas that do that, and we'll go to one a day and tell them, here's an opportunity for you to expand what you're offering and do a better job with consumers because you're tailoring the product. And they did it. So their spend was small, but I said to them, you're Intel inside of $1 billion brand. And so therefore you are strategic. You're not big, but you're still strategic. And it's just keep working until you find out what that right combination is.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, time goes by very quickly. For those of you who want to go deep into Tom's story, highly recommend it. It's one of the books that I've highlighted the most in my life. Amazon.com, Walmart.com, highly recommended. In the foreword of this book, John Pepper, which is a legendary CEO of P&G, describes Tom's work as a revolution in retailing. It's been a privilege and an honor to have a revolutionary in retailing in our scenery here, in our auditorium. We really appreciate what you've done, the way you impacted retailing, and the way you continue impacting our industries with your knowledge, with your expertise, with your warm heart, sharing your
And I'm happy. I'm going to eat the cocktail tonight. If anybody wants to talk anything more,
Tom will be around
back,
all
whatever.
day. Thank you, Tom.
I'm